当中的通过大运河的影响，或者说作为一个非常重要的基础设施影响下的这个园林营造。那么接下来我们会有一个另外一位重量级的学者的演讲，但是他呢我首先介绍一下啊，是Patricia Buckley Ebrey， 我们中文名字叫伊佩霞教授。伊佩霞教授呢是华盛顿大学历史系的荣休教授。那他呢也是这个非常资深的一位这个历史学的研究者，尤其是专注于中国的宋代的社会文化史、女性史和视觉文化，以及特别有一本这个可能在很多今天来的这个学者当中也听到过的宋徽宗这本著名的著作。那么他的这个历史的研究呢是有非常这个深远的学术影响，他曾经获得过列文森奖和历史研究的终身成就奖，也得到过亚洲研究杰出贡献奖，真的是在这个领域非常非常重要的一位学者。他的这个今天呢是我们之前通过邮件去邀请伊佩霞教授来关于我们这个宋代苏州的这样一个主题，请他是不是能够给我们做一个研究上的这个研讨的贡献。那他也很愉快地答应了我们的请求。但是因为他年纪也比较高了，所以这个长途旅行也不是很方便，所以我们就以这个视频的方式来播放他今天为我们特别准备的一个演讲。这个演讲的题目是 The Southern Song as a Resilient Empire。我们简单的把它翻译成中文是这个坚韧的南宋。那我们请这个工作人员播放文件。是在这个电脑上的是吗？好。你看一下。
Hi, I'm Pat Ebrey, retired from the University of Washington. I'm going to talk to you today about the resilience of the Southern Song. So let me share my PowerPoint. So, as I said, my topic is the Southern Song as a resilient empire. So what I'm going to talk about is the Song survival after the Jurchen invasion. The usual question that scholars ask is, what did the Song do wrong? Why couldn't it drive the Jurchen out of North China? But I want to ask the opposite question. What did Song do right? How was the Song able to survive and thrive? Now, I think we do have to all recognize that the Song faced a dire situation. There had been an alliance negotiated in 1120 where the Sung and Jin were going to collaborate to defeat the Liao. And then later, Liao invades Sung. They get a lot of booty in 1126. They come back in 1127. Sung resists. But in the end, Jurchen win. They abduct the two emperors, Huizong, who had already abdicated, and his son Qinzong. Much of everyone in the imperial family they could find, the eunuchs, thousands of officials. They put a Song official on the throne, Zhang Bangchang, as a puppet ruler. Just the next month later, in the Southern Song, high officials and a former empress decide that it's essential to put a new person on the throne. There was only a close relative available, the ninth son of Huizong, so the brother of the current emperor. He's known in history as Gaozong. Jiang Baochang turns over the seals. He appoints a chief counselor, Li Gang. Li Gang was a northerner. He'd been popular under Qinzong for his strong resistance to the Jurchen. And he pushed Gaozong to return to Kaifeng, and also to pursue the Jurchen. Even though Gaozong's only 20 years old, he did feel that he could dismiss Li Gang, and Li Gang only stayed 75 days. We get into the next year, 1128. Situation is not good. They call for people to rise up in the north, local resistance. A military man named Zheng Ze is in Kaifeng, and he wants Gaozong to return. Song though sends envoys asking for peace. By the 10th month, Gaozong has moved to Yangzhou on the Grand Canal, and there's another Jurchen invasion. They come in on 3 different routes. Song loses Shanxi and more. In a kind of desperate move, they break the dikes on the Yellow River, causing lots of people to lose their lives. But the Jurchen concentrate on pursuing Gaozong, and they get to the suburbs of Yangzhou. And here I'm showing you a map that will just give you a sense of how many times people are going back and forth along these routes. And you can see at the very bottom, the boat route down to Wenzhou. So here, let me just give you an example of a witness to this, written somewhat later. A man named Zhuang Zhuo. He writes, in the autumn of the first year of Jianyan, I traveled from Rong to Xuchang, hurrying to Songchang. Those are all in Henan. For several thousand li, there was not even a chicken or a dog, and the wells were filled with bodies so that there was no water to drink. The Buddhist temples were empty. Their clay statues had all been smashed in order to get at things put inside them. Burials had to be done without complete coffins. The dry land was already covered with invasive plants, and no one was picking the beans, chestnuts, pears, or dates. So a pretty awful situation. In 1129, Gaozong manages to get to Hangzhou. There's a military coup where a couple of generals force him to abdicate in favor of his infant son, but other generals gather forces to rescue him. Gaozong moves to Jiankang, 3 months later to Zhenjiang, then Hangzhou. Jin creates a new buffer state under a man named Liu Yu, which was called Qi. The next year, 1130, Gaozong is in Yangzhou with Jin army in pursuit. Gaozong has to flee by boat 1 day ahead of the pursuers. The Jurchen pursue by boat, but they're unsuccessful. The Jurchen also pursue the Empress Dowager into Jiangxi. Song forces are able to harry the Jurchen on their retreat. They move into Shanxi, but Song is able to defend Sichuan. An interesting step taken at this point was to get some clansmen who could be raised for succession in case Gaozong doesn't have a surviving son. Clearly, they're already thinking of the survival of the dynasty. So I think here we have to think about what does it mean for the Song to survive? Is territory the big issue or the survival of the monarchy? Now, I don't think they ever say this quite so bluntly, but I think it's a question that underlies many of the fierce disputes at court. Is it the ruler's job to go to the front and push for offensive action, or find a defensible place and seek to negotiate? And so I'll just mention a couple of the people who were active in these debates. One is Zhang Jun. He was a relatively young person at this time. He had a jinshi, but he takes to the military role. And he's a key person in retaining Sichuan. He also played a role in saving Gaozong from the coup. He's willing to raise taxes to support his troops. He wants the capital at Jiankang, and he proposes a northern expedition, but that expedition fails. Another man is Louis Hao. He's a northerner, older. He has lots of experience with supplying armies. He's important in saving Gaozong from the coup. He is on the boat with Gaozong, and he wants Gaozong to move to Hubei as a safer place. Then there's Zhao Ding. He's also a northerner. He's very active in Neo-Confucian circles. He was with Gaozong at sea. He's more cautious, less hawkish. He wants to scale back the power of the military commanders. Next year, Gaozong is in Shaoxing. They have to deal with problems of deserters in the armies and also a lot of bandits rising up. The next year, Gaozong returns to Hangzhou, which he already sees as the best place for a temporary capital, but many people are against this idea. In this year, one of the Song commanders, Li Cheng, becomes a bandit and defects to Liu Yu. So bad news. And that Li Cheng captures Shenyang, but later UFA recovers. So that's where UFA comes in. And UFA is able in 1134 to regain much of the territory between the Huai and the Yangtze rivers. There's also a bit of a break because the Jin emperor dies and their troops fall back, and Gaozong pushes peace negotiations. In 1135, Sung is making progress at the internal level, defeating rebels and the like. But 1137, you get some more bad news. A former bandit who'd been made a general, Li Chung, goes over to the puppet regime with 40,000 troops. In the same year, Liu Yu is deposed by Jin. The next year, 1138, there is a truce, but some sporadic fighting continues, and Gaozong now puts his efforts into controlling the generals. In 1139, the Jurchen retake Kaifeng, and 1141, there's finally a peace agreement. But there still are many people opposed to this, people we call revanchists, meaning they want to go back. They stripped the generals, or at least some of the generals of their armies. UFA is killed. And Gaozong's mother is returned, which was a very big thing to Gaozong. This begins the period where Qin Gui is the dominant leader at court. So I've just sort of given you a kind of narrative. Why was this so difficult? Why did it take more than a decade to reach a stable situation? One thing is the Jurchen kept attacking. There wasn't much of a respite. They came numerous times. Another is that the Song government didn't have time to bring its records with us. It didn't have physical offices for people. It was very chaotic, those trying to, say, raise taxes. There's displaced people everywhere, both ordinary people and officials. A lot of banditry just because desperate people need food. Another thing is that so many of the people who were appointed as chief counselors were strong revanchists. They're looking at this in a different way than Gaozong was. This also led to infighting at court, that these people who had strong opinions weren't able to pick a leader that they felt they could all follow. So what made the difference? I think one of the most important things is this commitment to keeping the throne occupied. A sense that the emperor is the center of the state, of the Guo, and that must hold. Another thing I think was very important was this willingness to relocate and to do it repeatedly. There was no sense that it was, in order to keep Kaifeng, it didn't matter if the whole rest of the dynastic house was killed. A third thing that was done and seemed in the end probably a smart decision was to be cautious in rebuilding the military. They had to get troops. They had to pay troops. They had to feed troops, but they didn't want a warlord situation, and they knew from history that this often happened. One thing that they did was offer positions to all officials who made it south. I think they also kept in mind that the treaty with Liao had worked quite well. The Northern Sung had been a strong country. And so Gaozong was willing to negotiate with Jin, hoping that Jin could in the end be much like Liao. So to Gaozong and at least some of his advisors, even calling themselves a vassal of Jin was a lesser evil than letting Jin control the whole territory. So, rebuilding military strength. We could use a little more attention to this. In the immediate aftermath of the loss of Kaifeng, generals were given very unlimited powers. But as stabilization occurred, as the situation became more stable, this was taken away from them step by step. It was also terribly important to get finances under control, to collect taxes so the army could be paid. They also helped in any way they could with encouraging self-defense forces and what were called righteous armies in the occupied territory. That's encouraging people to rise up or harass the Jurchen. They, when they suppressed bandits, they often tried to recruit them into the army. This is something we know nowadays in the battles between Russia and the Ukraine. They were willing to take the offensive. They try it several times. They're just not very successful at it. They do take advantage of the geography in the sense that once you get south of the Huai, where there's more water, the Jurchen cavalrymen often had trouble. And so, especially the Yangtze is a kind of defense. Then I think it's equally important that they kept the allegiance of the elite. Here, I think they owe a huge debt to the success of the Northern Sung, of the alliance between the those who became officials and the monarchy. That this meant that the elite wanted to see the Sung survive. Any who made it south quickly get offices and salaries. They're not going to starve to death. They even start the exams again right away. I think the first time in 1130. Again, a commitment to the elite. I think we might even see some impact of a growing ethnic identity. Here, I would recommend, I don't know if it's been translated into Chinese yet, a Nicholas Tackett's book on the birth of the Chinese nation, I think it's called, where he plays up that the large number of high officials who traveled to Liao on missions came to see the ways they were different and be more aware of what we would say a kind of Chinese identity to the Sung. Definitely there's a weak point over the tension about the peace process. On the other hand, the Southern Sung was a extraordinarily prosperous society. Here I'm showing you a picture from of Westlake at Hangzhou. They also celebrated the survival of dynasty in quite a few paintings, and I'll just give you a glimpse of a few of them. This is just one scene of a painting that's in the Tianjin Museum. So, auspicious omens for dynastic revival. This is another one on welcoming the imperial carriage. This is Gaozong's mother and the coffin with Huizong being brought back. They also celebrated some of the generals who played a part in preserving the Song. So here I'd like to bring up, in a sense, why I think it's worth thinking about the early stages of the Southern Song. I think they help us think about some of the big questions about Chinese history. So if we take a world history point of view, almost everyone agrees that the Song stands out for its many dynasties that were long-lasting. We'll say long-lasting, at least 250 years, say, and ones that were unified. And by that, I mean that they held both the Yellow River and the Yangtze River regions. This is something that quite a few recent authors have discussed and proposed explanations. To give just a few examples, some people stress the fact that the Chinese written script is not phonetic, and so you could have people who couldn't understand each other in speech, who could read the same writings, so that made it possible for them to see themselves as belonging to the same culture. Another idea that's been brought up, this is, I think Yuri Pines has pressed this the most, is that during the Warring States period, intellectual leaders started stressing the importance of unity, that there should just be one state, not rival states. Another person who's been played a prominent role in proposing some of this is Dingxin Jiao Dingxin. He's argued that the combination of legalism and Confucianism in the former Han led to a pragmatic form of government that then continues through most of the rest of Chinese history. So these are kinds of explanations which emphasize things that are there in China from at least the Han period. But the question that I'm thinking about is, do they work for later periods? So here I think the Southern Song is a good sort of test case where we can think about these issues. You could argue the fact that the Song was able to survive after 1130 is what makes the Song one of the major dynasties. It is a dynasty that lasts more than 3 centuries. On the other hand, you can't count the Southern Song as a unified period. Jin does hold the old heartland, so it is a period of division. So how do we balance those two? Jia Dingxin also brings up the idea of an alliance between the Confucian educated elite and the ruling house. And this, I would say, certainly holds true for the Song. I think that's a very big element and what makes it possible for the Song to continue. On the issue of ideas, I would rather strongly disagree with Yuri Pines. He says that the idea of the superiority of unity is so strong that in later dynasties, people thought it would be better to be unified under an alien regime than to be divided. I see absolutely no sense that in the Southern Song, there were many people going around saying, oh, it would have been better for the Jin to have conquered us. That is, of course, one side's unification is the other side's being conquered. So I think in terms of ideas, I think identifying the state with the monarchy is more important than the ideal of unity. Of course, people thought unity would be better than division, but not to the point that they wanted the Jurchen to rule them. There, I think it's helpful to ask ourselves the question, What if the Jin had unified all of China? Who would have been better off? Would anyone have been better off? Possibly the Chinese in North China would have benefited if Jin had conquered the whole country. There would then have been an even greater majority of Chinese. The Jin state would have been able to draw on more of the economic resources of the South. On the other hand, there was a bigger population of Chinese under Southern Song than under Jin. Would they have been better off? I think it would be hard to imagine that they would. I tend to think, though I haven't researched it in detail, that most Chinese in the Southern Song, or generally speaking, were better off under the Southern Song than they would later be under the Mongols. It is possible, I think, that perhaps if Jin had conquered all of China, it would have been strong enough. Maybe it could have resisted the Mongols. Maybe the Mongols would have been destroyed early on and would not have created the Mongol Empire. This, of course, is totally speculative. But that's the only thing I can imagine as a really positive outcome if the Jin had conquered all of China. But these are some of the sort of big questions, I think, that make the Southern Song an interesting period in Chinese history. And I will stop there.
尹佩霞教授的这个演讲给到大家一个更大的视野来认识南宋这个早期的时期，以及如果南宋在这个时期它的政治的变化发生重大的变动的话，会对中国的历史产生什么样的影响，是一个非常宏观的大的格局的假说和想象。那今天呢我们其实是
苏州市文物保护管理所和西交利物浦大学的邀请。